Welcome back again to another GWT tutorial, and this will be the very first tutorial in which we are actually going to look at Google Web Toolkit. So before I actually start showing something about Google Web Toolkit, I would first like to discuss the concepts behind Google Web Toolkit. So for that I've prepared a little presentation. Let me just open it. So there goes my PowerPoint. And there you go. No, I don't want to make any changes. So I'm going to discuss some of the GWT basics in this presentation. So what is GWT, or Google Web Toolkit? Well, Google Web Toolkit is a Ajax toolkit, which basically allows us to easily develop Ajax-based web applications using the Java programming language. And why the Java programming language? That is what will be discussed later. So some of the advantages of Ajax-based web applications is that they offer rich functionality without needing any plugins. For example, you don't need any Flash plugins. Which is a big issue, especially when dealing with iPhone and iPad. They are applications that are based on HTML and JavaScript, which gives us another advantage that we can actually, instead of doing a full page reload, we can actually refresh parts of our pages, creating an overall more smoother user experience. It runs on all platforms because it is HTML and JavaScript, and runs on all browsers, even though that runs on all browsers is not entirely true, as you will see in a moment. Because of the disadvantages of Ajax-based web applications are that every browser handles Ajax differently. Every browser has a different way of interpreting JavaScript, which means if I write a JavaScript script for one browser, it may not necessarily work in a other browser. So a lot of programmers actually spend a lot of time debugging JavaScript just to get it to work across all browsers and across all versions, to make it even worse. So you may be wondering, so why should I use GWT then, if basically this JavaScript can actually cause problems across multiple browsers? Well, the advantage of GWT being a Ajax toolkit actually is because of the fact that Google Web Toolkit deals with the fact that every browser handles Ajax differently. And how does that happen? Well, when I've created my application in Java and it is compiled, specific Ajax code is generated for every browser, meaning if I deploy my application and I open it with Internet Explorer, the specific JavaScript code for Internet Explorer will be run. If I open Google Chrome, then basically the JavaScript for Google Chrome will be run. So this allows me as a developer to basically write one set of code, which in this case is Java, which can then run on all browsers. Even though, having said that, it is in my experience with Google Web Toolkit, which has been a few years by now, that some minor problems still occur on some browsers, and these minor problems are mostly related to the fact that certain controls may display differently, the layout might be a little bit off, and it's really very minor problems. Some bigger problems generally surfaced when I use third-party components. Third-party components are not always tested properly across all browsers, so that could lead for a little bit more trouble. But sticking with the pure Google Web Toolkit code as written by Google, this runs pretty much across all browsers, save for a few visual inconsistencies here and there. So as I mentioned just now, well, Google Web Toolkit comes with a lot of pre-built components. The styling is done in CSS, meaning if I want to change the look and feel of my application, I have to use CSS, which is in line with normal HTML practices, and especially in line with HTML5. As I mentioned, I can use third-party components as well. There's a huge number of libraries out there that contain additional features, additional GUI components, additional graphical things that offer me a great amount of functionality done by third parties, which can just simply be plugged into any Google Web Toolkit application, save for a few restrictions for a few libraries here and there. Most of all, and this is another thing that I really like, is that Google Web Toolkit takes a strong approach, a strong object-oriented approach towards software architecture, which means that proper software architecture as applied in Java, because Google Web Toolkit is also Java-based, can be applied in Google Web Toolkit as well. This offers a lot of potential for maintaining applications and scaling up applications. So this is definitely not something that should be overlooked. So all in all, we have a very powerful platform here, which can be used to build rather complex applications in a fairly short time. So before having discussed a bit of the overall concept behind Google Web Toolkit, I would now like to discuss how a Google Web Toolkit app is composed, how you can break it down into components. Which you will later see as well when I give the code example. So looking at a Google Web Toolkit application as a whole, basically I would like to display it as a big box. And this Google Web Toolkit application contains a client component, which is the GUI of our application. And it contains a server-side component, which is essentially, well, our backend of our application, as pretty much every web application or any application has a backend. The client part, when compiled, is basically consists of Ajax, while the server backend is actually a G2E servlet, even though this is not quite true. It is, from what I can tell, having worked with GWT, it is a server-side component, a servlet that is derived from the G2E servlet, but Google has made its own interpretation in it. In terms of how it programs pretty much the same. So in a way, I like seeing the server side of the Web Toolkit project pretty much as a servlet, a G2E servlet, even though the coding is slightly different. Okay, our client GUI basically runs on a browser, so when we invoke our application, our client code, the JavaScript, the HTML file plus JavaScript is downloaded to the browser and executed there. Our server backend basically keeps on running on a server, and these two communicate with each other using a RPC call. And what does RPC call mean? Well, it means remote procedure call. As a matter of fact, I should be saying a RPC or remote procedure call, not RPC call, because then I would be saying remote procedure call. Anyway, about RPC, I will probably explain that in a later tutorial. So for now, you can just assume that, well, RPC is the mechanism that facilitates the communication between our GUI and our backend. One more thing I would like to repeat, both the client GUI and the backend and the RPC mechanism are all implemented in Java, which makes it, as I mentioned, nice and convenient. So I have just one code base which can run on all platforms. So what am I going to do in today's tutorial? Well, I'm going to set up a basic GWT project. I'm going to build a basic GUI in GWT, and I'm not going to bother with the RPC and the server-side code. I will do that in a later tutorial. So in this tutorial, we are purely focusing on building a basic GUI and getting a look and feel as for how this is done. Alright, so that's the end of my slideshow. So now, on to the actual demonstration. Alright, so let's start up my trusty old Eclipse. And again, it seems to take a while, which generally always happens when I'm making a recording. Anyway, let's just wait for it. Okay, almost there. Loading workbench. Wow, it really is taking a sweet time today. There we are. Okay, one thing you may notice as compared to my previous tutorials, my Eclipse looks quite differently. This is because I have installed several other plugins next to the Google Web Toolkit plugin. Well, just for your information, I have installed the Aptana Studio to help me with HTML5 development. I've installed the Android plugin to help me with my Android development. And I've installed a PHP plugin and a few more other stuffs. This does not affect the tutorial in any way. Even if you have not installed those plugins, things will still work exactly the same. So even though my Eclipse looks a bit different than your Eclipse, no doubt, it is not really gonna affect much. Actually, the only reason why I installed these plugins is for the simple reason because I need them for my work currently. So let's just wait for my workspace to finish building. That's one drawback to having the Android plugin and SDK installed, is my workbench generally takes a while to load. Okay, and we're done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another Google Web Toolkit project. I've actually already created one, GWT Project 0, in my previous tutorial. But now let's just create a new one in which we are actually going to do our development. So again, I go to File, New, then choose Other. Then I simply choose Google Web Application Project. Press Next, and the project name in this case is going to be GWT Project 1. The package will be called edu.example. In this case, I have no intention of using the Google App Engine, so I'm just going to unselect it. No particular reason really, I just feel that the debugging is a bit slower when the App Engine is used. Moreover, if you have created a Google Web Toolkit project, you don't necessarily need to deploy it to Google App Engine. You can, for example, also use Apache Tomcat or JBoss or any other Java-based web container. Lastly, I'm going to select Generate Project Sample Code. This basically creates an entire example project for us. Even though in this case I'm not going to use much of the example code, I like to generate it because simply it puts all the files that I need there. Which gives me a good starting point. It saves me the trouble from having to create some files on my own. So, pressing Finish. So the project is being created. There we go. So the first thing when I open this thing is I'm going to notice in my source package there is a whole bunch of classes already. Here's my client package, which is the client component you just saw in my presentation. The server component and a shared package, which is basically for shared classes between various parts of the system. Okay, I don't use this, so I'm just going to delete it altogether. Okay, as I mentioned, the client package, and never mind the error that I'm getting right now, the client package basically contains my GUI code. My server package basically contains my server-side implementation. As a matter of fact, there's a server-side implementation already, which I'm also not going to use, so I'm just going to delete it. Then for my client package, there's a reference to the server package there called greeting service and greeting service async. Since I'm not going to bother with server-side code at all, I'm just going to delete those. And even if I wanted to do a server implementation, I'll just make one of my own. And will not use the example greeting service. That one is just for reference. So then finally I want to keep this file, because this is what they call the entry point, which I will explain in a moment. So when I'm going to open this file, you will actually see there's a whole bunch of code there already. Let me just enlarge it for you. As a matter of fact, there's a field verifier there, which I just removed. There's some static error message that I can also just remove. There's a reference to the greeting service async class, which I just deleted, so this code can also just be removed. And there is a unmodule load method. This is the entry point of the program, or the very first method that gets executed when running the GWT project. This is very similar to the static void main method in a conventional Java program. Anyway, I don't need any of this example code, but I do want to keep the onModule load method, so I'm just going to delete all of this example code. There you go, just maintaining a empty method. Then I have some redundant imports now, which I'm just going to remove by right-clicking, then choosing source and choosing organize imports. And then all the redundant imports are gone. So that's basically my entry point class, and I'll continue working here later. Let's first clean up the project a little bit more. If I go to my war webinf web.xml file, I will actually see there's still a reference there to my server-side servlet. And for those who are familiar with G2E programming, you will already notice that the web.xml is also a part of G2E programs and is used for configuration. And this is exactly the same thing. So as I would normally define my Java servlet in my web.xml file, in this case a GWT created servlet would also be defined here. As a matter of fact, here's the redundant, now redundant specification tags. So I'm just going to remove those two. I'm going to keep my welcome file because that is going to be my start page, GWT project1.html. So which is this file. As a matter of fact, every Google Web Toolkit project generally only has one file. Okay, my Aptana Studio is telling me that there is a error here, which is actually not an error. The only thing is that Aptana Studio is a bit particular about caps. So that's solved already. Most likely, if you are running this in basically normal Eclipse for G2E developers, you will not have this problem. It is purely because I have the Aptana Studio plugin installed as well. So let's just enlarge this. So there's basically some markup. So there's a project title that I want to set. So I'm just going to name this one GWT Project 1. There is a JavaScript reference here, so more on that later. And there's some stuff in the body, so I'm just going to delete the markup here. Okay, so then we're basically done in this HTML file. As you can see, there's actually a script tag here. This script tag actually points to the compiled JavaScript file, which is generated whenever I compile a project. So as I mentioned, even though I program my application in Java, when I hit compile, the Java code gets converted into JavaScript, and this JavaScript is included in our HTML page with this tag. So as long as this tag is here, your Google Web Toolkit project will work. If you remove it, it will not do anything anymore. Then next to that there is a CSS reference here, and as I mentioned, CSS is intended for styling. As a matter of fact, the CSS file is here with some default markup, which I'm just going to leave for what it is for now. So let's just, before I continue, recap what I did just now. I basically removed everything in the server package. I removed the server interfaces called greeting service in my client package. I have cleaned out my starter class. Basically the onModule load is now empty. I have cleaned out all markup in my GWT project 1 HTML file, and I have cleaned out all servlet references in my web.xml file. So now we basically have an empty project ready to go with all the files present, from which I have not yet discussed one file, which actually can be found under edu.example, which is the GWT project1.gwt.xml file. Let's just open this file for a moment. This file is actually a Google Web Toolkit specific configuration file. It actually does a few things, and you generally don't have to bother with it unless you are going to import third-party components, which you will not be doing in this tutorial. It basically inherits from some core Google Web Toolkit stuff, as the comment implies. It references a default style, which is based on how the Google Web Toolkit's control look. And it defines the entry point class, meaning it defines a class that contains the entry point of the application. In this case, it's GWT project 1, thus is nicely referenced here, entry point class edu.example.client GWT project 1. Then, because it needs to know where the code is that needs to be converted from Java to JavaScript, it also contains a reference to the client package, which is this, and the share package, which is redundant at this point. So anyway, I will just leave it for what it is. So that's basically that's the basic components of a GWT project. So now basically I can open my GWT project 1 class again and actually start coding. But before I start coding, allow me to show you some of the graphical stuff that we have available in Google Web Toolkit. So for that I open my browser and naturally go to the Google website. If it wants to load, of course. So I'm going to Google now on Google Web Toolkit widget showcase. Showcase of features. Well, sounds good. Okay, so this is basically a page from Google itself in which they demonstrate some of their widgets. So for example, I have a checkbox here. And if I want to know how these checkboxes are coded, I can click on source code. And then I can basically flash out that, well, a checkbox has to be made by taking checkbox is checkbox equals new checkbox, and then inputting the day that I want to be the day behind it. For example, next to that we have some buttons. Oh, stop poking me. We can have some custom buttons, which allows to attach a picture to it. There's even stuff like a date picker. And from all of this you can actually look up the source code in the showcase itself. So basically all your basic controls are there. Your radio button, your basic button, a date picker even. Then there's some text fields that can be, well, used or disabled, or there can be a password text box, there could be a text area. And again, all the source code is a given. So basically there's nothing really that we don't have in any other web language other than that Google has built it for us in what they call a widget. Before I'm actually just gonna start applying it, let me show you one more important thing, which is actually the panels. Panels are a way to structure your application. They have a whole bunch of panels. I'm just gonna highlight the simplest ones to use, and that will actually give you a lot of flexibility already. One of them being the horizontal panel. The horizontal panel is actually, you should imagine it as a invisible table that automatically resizes to some extent. Basically what it does is I have a panel, and whenever I add a control to this panel, in this case a button, it will just keep on horizontally stacking them. So it's like a one row table, I guess, with as many columns as we like, and every time we add something to it, it just adds an additional column, and thus ends up stacking the horizontal and vertical, ends up stacking all the controls horizontally. Vertical panel, which is the exact opposite, it keeps on stacking your controls vertically. Then, well, I can show this one I guess as well. There's an absolute panel, which basically is a bit like a grid that I can stick other controls or widgets on based on coordinates. Then there is the flex table, which is basically a table that will just automatically adjust its layout based on widgets you put in there at a certain coordinate in the table. This is also a very convenient one to use. Okay, so enough talking and demoing, and let's do some more doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need something to capture, to put my controls in. So in this case, let's just use a vertical panel, which I'm going to name vPanel, and I'm going to declare it as a vertical panel. Vertical panel. As you can see, I have an error now. This is because I haven't handled the import of this yet. So in Eclipse, it's very easy to handle imports. I can just hover over it and let the auto-completion say, hey, you can import vertical panel from com Google Web Toolkit google.gwt.user.client.ui. That's exactly the one I want, so let's just handle that import. Then I would like to create a label for displaying something. And, well, I don't want to do a hello world here, that's a bit childish, so it's such a common example. So I will just do a all your days are belong to us. And again, I'm going to import label under, well, I could import it through auto-completion here. Or alternatively, I could say right-click, source, organize imports, after which it's asked me, so which label you want to import. I always want to get the com.google.gwt.user.client.ui package that contains most of the controls. Okay, then that one is imported. So now I have a loose label and I have a vertical panel. So naturally the label should go into the vertical panel. So for that I'm just simply going to say vpanel.add. And again, I want to wait for my auto-completion to come up. Okay, add my LBL. Which basically means that, well, right now my label is inside the vertical panel. So all that's left for me to do is I want this vertical panel to be displayed on my screen. So how do I do that? Well, the metaphor for this would be that I take my panel and stick it to my HTML page. So what is my HTML page? Well, that would be root panel dot get dot add, and then I'm simply going to add my vPanel to it. Okay, so that's our very basic implementation. So before I continue in demoing more things, let me just run this project. So for that I'm going to right click on my project, say run as web application. Then basically when it's ready to go, it basically gives me a URL here, which I simply copy. Then I go to my Google Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, in this case Chrome, and I simply paste it there and execute and go. Then basically the Google Web Toolkit plugin will start working again. Why do we need this plugin? Is because the Java code that I wrote only gets converted into JavaScript when I hit compile. As you may have noticed, I did not hit compile just now. As a matter of fact, I don't have to when I'm still developing. The plugin that we installed in our Chrome browser in the other tutorial basically will translate our Java code to JavaScript on the fly as and when I'm using the application. This does result in a slight performance issue sometimes, but generally it's pretty smoothly. And as a matter of fact, there's my all your base are belong to us label already. How I can see that the plugin is done loading, when actually in my Eclipse it will say module GWT project 1 has been loaded. So let's just repeat that again just to demonstrate it a bit more. I'm just going to run it again. I take the URL, paste and go. Then while it's being loaded, you will actually see nothing here. When it's done, the message module GWT project 1 has been loaded will appear. Naturally, in this case, very fast because it's just one label. If you have larger projects, it could take a few seconds. Okay, as you may have spotted me doing just now, when I want to stop running the project, I simply press the terminate selected launch button here, even though I don't have to. As a matter of fact, let me just start it up once again. I don't have to stop the project every time I want to make a change. As a matter of fact, it can, if you want to make small changes, it can be really irritating to constantly stop and relaunch the project. So let me just start up again. So as you can see, the project is running right now. It's also running in my browser. So now let me just make a modification to the project. I have this label I've added to it. Now I want to create a button as well. Button btn1 is new button. And well, I'm gonna put an empty string in there. Do the import first. Then what text shall I do? Well, let's do something humorous. Touch me, please. Okay, then this button will also be added to our vertical panel. So the button should now display as well because the button is added to the vertical panel and the vertical panel is attached to the HTML page. So instead of going through the motion of stopping my project and then restarting it again, I'm just going to go directly to my browser and press Ctrl F5. This will trigger the project to reload and all the changes to come through. So I can press this touch me please button. As a matter of fact, I'm touching it right now, but nothing really happening yet. Maybe I'll do a little click handler implementation later. But first I would like to show how we can also use an image. So for that I actually have prepared a little image which I am going to move to my project. So that I go to my workspace, I go to my GWT project 1, my war folder. Like with any normal G2E project, all the web content has to be put in the war folder. So in there you see my HTML page, my CSS, my JavaScript, and my web inf configuration. So it's pretty much the same way as a normal G2E project. So now I'm going to create a separate package called images, and I'm going to put my image in there. Okay, that's that. Then it should have appeared in my Eclipse as well. If it does not appear, what you can do is right click on your project and choose refresh. Then basically any content that was added later will be displayed. So now let's add this little image to the application as well. I'm going to put it above the label. So for this I'm going to say image img is new image. And the path in this case is again as a string, images dot a slash 116639 dot gif, save, and then just reload my project, and it's not working. So what did I do wrong here? Well, most likely I forgot about a slash here. So let's try again. And now it's taking a really long time to come up. Okay, this could be one of those moments that I really do need to restart my project. Oh wait, of course. What I did here is very foolish. I created an image, but I did not add it to my vertical panel. So naturally it is not going to be displayed. So what I need to do is I say vpanel.add img. Again, I'm just improvising these examples as I go along. I have no script for this. So yes, mistakes do happen. Let's just run it again. Okay, then going here. And project is loaded, and we can see there's Dilbert. So yeah, we have our image here, we have our label, we have a button. So what else can we do with this? I can add a little text field, I guess. So in this case, I'm going to say text box txt1 is new text box. Again, I'm going to handle the import. And again, I'm going to add it to my vertical panel. So now let's reload this thing again. Okay, so our image, our label, the button, and the text box. So I can keep on adding tons and tons of controls, but it's gonna get very boring at some point. So why don't I attach some functionality to this button? Since I'm improvising this on the spot, let me just build some functionality that takes whatever text I have in this text box and puts it in this label here. Okay, just for the sake of better GUI, I'm gonna move the button to below the text box. So we have our label, our text box, our button. To make it, as you can see, actually the sequence in which I add the widgets or controls to my vertical panel actually determines the sequence in which they are in. Basically, they are stacked in order of sequence. As a matter of fact, I can make this sequence even more transparent by simply saying vpanel, can I set your border width to 1, which actually will force a border around the widget. So let's just reload again. So yeah, as you can see, it's actually a bit like a auto-resizable single column table in this case. So let's make it, before I'm gonna start implementing some functionality on this button, a little bit more interesting by throwing in a horizontal panel as well. I want to use this horizontal panel to put the button next to the text field. Oops, and now my plugin has crashed. No idea why, but probably because I did a lot of refreshing, so no problem. I'm just gonna press terminate and I'm going to launch it again. And again, these are all things that can happen to you as well, so it's in a way not bad that I show it. Okay, there we are again. So now let me add instead of adding the text box and the button to the vertical panel, I'm now going to declare a horizontal panel named hPanel. And like the vertical panel, I'm gonna initialize it by saying is new horizontal panel. And again, I'm gonna handle the import. So instead of so I want this text box to be added to the horizontal panel, so I'm going to say, instead of vpanel.add, I'm going to say hpanel.add for the text box and hpanel.add for the button. Then next to that, I'm going to say vpanel, can you please incorporate, or can you please add hpanel as well? And just to make it a little bit more transparent again how this GUI is structured, I'm going to set the border width of the horizontal panel to 1 as well. Okay, now let's refresh. Okay, so as you can see now, I still have my vertical panel, but now it has a horizontal panel in there, and if you look very closely, you can actually see the border. And this horizontal panel actually contains my text field and my button, and my plugin has crashed again for some reason. Let me check whether or not there's some funny exception in here that I caused. Nope, doesn't look like it, so I think the plugin is just being cranky. So yeah, anyway, just to avoid this, every time I'm going to make a change, I am simply going to restart the application, even though because I don't have that much functionality to show anymore anyway. So anyway, let's go and implement that button. So if I look at the button code, I will actually see that btn1 has a method called addClickHandler. This is very similar to the click listener in Java or Swing. As a matter of fact, the program's almost virtually the same. So what I can do is I can add a click handler and then create an instance of click handler by saying is new click handler. And then simply, well, first handle the import. And then implement the methods of the clickHandler class, which contains a method onClick, and which is just as with the normal Java equivalent, contains the code that happens when the button is pressed. However, I'm not a big fan of this architecture because it makes the code a bit messy, a bit bloated. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to implement click handlers in private classes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say private class button click handler implements click handler. And again, as with the normal click handler I created just now, I'm just going to add the unimplemented methods. And then I can basically put my code here. As for this error, I can basically remove it by saying, well, attach a new button click handler. There you go. So what is the thing that we want to do right now? Well, basically I want to take the text of my text box and put it in my label. This brings about a problem, and normal Java programmers can already realize it. My text box is locally declared in my onModuleLoad method, which means that inside this class I cannot access it. Thus, I'm going to change the declaration of this. I'm going to move the declaration up to the class level, then declare a private text box txt1, while further down I'm going to change the declaration of txt1 to this.txt1, is new text box, basically referencing the text box that is declared here. Which means that inside here, txt1, I can suddenly access this text box as per normal. So in this case, I want to get the text in the text box. So for that I'm going to say txt.getText, which outputs a string. And then I want to set it to my label. But again, same problem. My label is locally declared. So I'm going to shift the declaration up to the class level. And say this.myLBL is new label. As a matter of fact, for consistency, I will also add a this here and a this there. For those who have experience in Java programming, you will know that this is not compulsory. However, I like to use it because I'm a very big fan of the auto-completion, which gets triggered when you press this. Moreover, it makes very clear to me which variables are declared globally. Okay, going back to our button click handler, the only thing that's left for me to do is say myLBL. Sorry, I forgot the variable name for a moment. Dot set text and then the text. Okay, so let's just run this project and see what happens. Okay, still the same layout, so let's now say hello Dilbert, and I press touch me please. It actually says hello Dilbert in this label. Okay, so that's basically some basic functionality attached to a button. I've shown how to make an image, I've introduced you to horizontal panel and vertical panel. And one question that may actually be on the top of your mind right now is, how can I apply this in proper OO architecture? Because right now all of my logic is in the onModule load method, or at the very least the same class, which is not exactly an ideal situation. In most cases we want to have multiple classes in our program. Okay, for this to illustrate, actually it's very simple. You can actually split up your GUI in small components. You may have noticed I use the term widget a lot. As a matter of fact, a text box is a widget, a button is a widget, a label is a widget, and you can create your own widgets, which you can then use in the very same manner as I am using a label or HPanel or text box. So to create my own widgets, I can do the following. I just create a new class. And I'm simply going to call this one page 1. And as a superclass, well, I'm not going to inherit right now. I will show you in a moment. So I just create it. So to indicate that this class is going to be our own widget that we have created ourselves, we're going to let this class inherit through extends from composite. Composite is a class in the Google Web Toolkit framework. Again in the UI class, which basically means this class is a widget composed out of other widgets. So to basically jumpstart the whole thing, I have to create a constructor for this class. And in this constructor I can basically define my whole GUI and all my widgets, or my whole hierarchy of widgets, because I can create more composite classes that are being used by other composite classes. Even though I don't have a picture right now to visualize it, in the end you're going to end up with a whole pyramid or hierarchy of GUI components, which I will probably demonstrate more of in the next tutorial. So in this case, I can build my whole GUI here, but I need one widget to jumpstart it all. So in this case, I'm going to start with a vertical panel. And I'm going to name this panel vPanel again. Why? Because it's going to replace the same vertical panel just now as I just used. So again, I'm going to handle the import. And to indicate that this vPanel is the widget with which everything has to start, I have to say init widget this dot vPanel. Meaning everything that is displayed in this class will start with this vertical panel. So now I can actually copy over or cut over all of the code that I've defined here. And simply paste it in here. And because I have some global declared variables, I need to, of course, cut and paste those over as well. So I'm going to put them below the vertical panel. And in the end, I need this button click handler. Okay, so when I save this, there's still an error because there's an import here that doesn't belong here. Okay, so that's that. Then I have an error. Well, I don't have an error yet, but I just have a redundant vertical panel here. So in this case, instead of using the vertical panel and attach it to the HTML page, I want to create an object of my page 1. Page 1 page is new page 1. And I'm going to attach this page to my root panel. So let's now run it again. And as you can see, the GUI has not changed at all. The only difference is that all of my GUI code is now shifted to this composite class, which is as a whole attached to the root panel. Okay, not much of a difference, but this actually is the groundwork for building up proper architecture for your Google Web Toolkit application. Okay, one more thing I would like to show before I end this tutorial is how you can indeed use composite widgets inside composite widgets. And I'm going to do a very quick example for this. I'm going to create another class. And I'm going to call this one page 2. In this case, I'll just directly inherit from the superclass. So I'll say browse, then search for composite. Then finish. So as you can see, the inheritance is already done. Again, I'm going to create a constructor here. And all of this needs to be jump started with something. Well, let me just stop first. So again, I guess in this case I could use a horizontal panel. Then I'm going to say init widget again, this dot hPanel. Then I need some content. So in this case, I am just going to create a flex table. And this flex table, well, I'm going to have it contain 4 labels. And since I am a lazy programmer, I'm honestly not gonna type this line 4 times. So I'm just gonna copy and paste it. Then I'm gonna add these labels to my flex table. So I'm gonna say tbl.setWidget. And if I use setWidget, as you can see in my autocompletion, I have to indicate the row, the column, and the actual widget. So in this case, I want to have as row 0, because it's a 0-based row. I want to have as my column 0, and my widget is going to be LBL1. Then again, because I'm a lazy programmer, I'm just going to copy it. So my next widget I would like to have still in the first row but the second column. So I'm going to say row number 0, column number 1, LBL2. The third one I want to have on the second row, so row number 1, column 0, LBL3. And the last one, row number 1, column number 1, label 4. Then to ensure that this table gets displayed, I'm simply going to attach this table to the hpanel. So hpanel.add tbl. Okay, and that's actually it for page 2. So now to demonstrate that I can actually attach this, use this composite widget in another composite widget, I'm going to go back to page 1. I'm going to create an instance of page 2 in here. We just enlarge it so you all have the overview. Page 2, 2 equals new page 2. And I'm going to attach 2 to the same vertical panel that I have been attaching. No, not BTM1, 2 that I've been attaching all my widgets to. So now let's save and run this project. Okay, and as you can see, I have my image, my label, my text field, my button, and a very small table here. As a matter of fact, you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4 labels here inside my vertical panel. To make it a bit more transparent, let me try and set the border width of the table as well. So I'm also going to set it to 1. Then reload my application. And as you can see, there's my table now with a small border around it. Alright, so what have we done today? Well, I have shown you how to create a basic Google Web Toolkit project. I've shown you some of the widgets that you can use. And I have shown you how you can group widgets together in composite widgets, which can be used in other composite widgets. Plus I've shown you how to implement a click handler. So I guess that would be enough for today. In the next tutorial I'll probably be spending more time on more GUI building, perhaps even in a proper architecture. Okay, until next time.